Caleb, I know who you think is going to be Tennessee's starting slot receiver. I'm going to tell you why it's not going to be Boo Carter. I'm sorry to bring everybody down. I will go ahead and share that with you right now. Listen, God, it just doesn't happen. Mark Jones would be the closest example of that. And there's a story on offthehooksports.com right now if you would like to read it. And Caleb, if you can pull up, I found Mark Jones's numbers earlier today. If you want to share his stats and what he was able to do, we'll go ahead and dive into four downs right now. And it's brought to you by Double D Piping.
Come on, guys, it's game time.
Four downs. Can you count? Four downs. 1, 2, 3, 4. The Dave Hooker Show with Caleb Calhoun. Represented by T. Scott Jones. BanksandJones.com. Tennessee's trial attorney. From the Ted Russell Ford Lincoln Studio, East Tennessee's #1 volume and customer service dealer. Ted Russell Ford and TedRussellLincoln.net. Now to the Dave Hooker Show on Off the Hook Sports.
All right, Caleb, four downs now. Let's take a look at the candidates for the slot receiver position. And I shared my thoughts on Boo Carter and why he won't have a major impact just because historically it doesn't happen. He'll have somewhat of an impact, especially in goal line. But Caleb, I know you feel much differently about it. So share, please.
Are we playing four downs or hot or cold?
We're playing four downs.
I'm confused. Okay, sorry. So you want me to ask about why Boo Carter, I think, will take over the position, or you want me to give you Mark Jones' numbers right now? Because I can do both, and I think Boo Carter could easily match Mark Jones.
All right, let's do that. Who remembers Mark Jones? Caleb did. I covered him and barely remember, but here we go.
Mark Jones had 36 catches for 556 yards and 5 touchdowns. He had 20 punt returns, averaged 15 yards a punt return, and had a punt return touchdown his senior year. He had 2 interceptions his senior year. Also was sent on a blitz that forced the Brock Berlin interception to Jabril Wilson to seal Tennessee's win at Miami that was 10-6. Mark Jones was a do-everything player. And if he had played on Michigan in 1997, he'd have been a Heisman finalist.
Okay, let's dive into this now. As Cooper Mays is not open in a smokehouse, he's going to the NFL despite the Facebook rumor to the contrary. Let's go ahead and get Coop's thoughts as we'll go into four downs right now, brought to you by Double D Piping.
Cooper Mays here. Hit like and subscribe.
Thanks, Coop. We'll do that. All right.
Coop here. First down.
All right. First down is this. Braylon Staley will be Tennessee's starter at the slot position. That's where I am. I think that Boo Carter is a 10 to 20% supplement at best at that position. In other words, he plays 10 to 20% of the snaps total at the slot receiver position.
Okay, so Braylon Staley is making rounds in spring ball, and Patrick Brown of 247 basically has a report out right now that Braylon Staley has reportedly shot up as Tennessee's new top slot receiver. I think that was always the plan for Josh Heupel and company, wasn't it? Was that Braylon Staley would step in eventually and be the top slot receiver because he was a phenom out of South Carolina. They see him as their next Jalen Hyatt. So I see all of that. If my theory doesn't come true, Braylon Staley will be the starting slot receiver. Just no questions asked. That's a clear as day fact.
Okay. So start in the slot. We'll ask you that, and we'll get to second down, Coop.
Cooper Mays here. Second down.
Okay. Now, this one doesn't need a takeoff because this is unfair to the young man. I remind you that first down brought to you by Sports Treasures, carrying over 5 million sports treasures and so much more. Follow on Facebook for the best sports memorabilia daily updates. It's right down below. Follow them on Facebook. It's asking a lot for Amari Jefferson to step in and play this season for 3 different reasons. One, a transfer is a transfer, right, Caleb? There's always a challenge in learning a new playbook.
Yep. Nope. Totally agree with that.
Not that you can't overcome it. 2, Josh Heupel just doesn't play these cats in their first year. So I'm sorry. You can get excited about Amari Jefferson all you want to. And this would speak to Boo to some extent as well. But the likelihood based off recent history is that a first-year player is not going to have an impact. That's why I think Mike Matthews will have a huge, huge impact. And the third factor is this. He's got a hip injury, man. He's not around for spring camp. He's going to be limited in the summer. His target date is preseason camp. There is no way you can miss, especially at receiver, quarterback, defensive back. Those summer workouts are so big for them, Caleb. It's just like missing 2 spring practices, if not more. When I say 2 spring practices, I mean the entire camp. Does that make sense?
Right. Particularly in Josh Heupel's system, where you have to develop a level of chemistry with the quarterback that most receivers don't have to develop. And so I'm sorry, he's just not going to be there as a contributor this year. We can talk 2026. The good news for him in 2026 is he'll have multiple options because he'll be able to work his way back into the rotation, and there's a chance he plays wide out instead of in the slot. So we'll just see how that goes. Because he can play both.
I don't see him playing that. He feels like a slot to me.
He can be a smaller wide out. He's able to kind of win those physical battles. And I mean, I don't think there are some systems. I know like what Hugh Freeze does, like he likes to have like all like 6'4", 6'5" guys at receiver on the outside. I don't think Josh Heupel has a requirement that his wideouts be tall, does he? That's not as significant for him.
No, but it's just natural. You know, they're going to be throwing more deep balls. You would like them to win jump ball battles. So I just think it's natural for any football team, really. Second Down was brought to you by Quality Tire Pros, serving Chattanooga's community since 1957. All major brands of tires, full service automotive, brakes, alignments, oil changes, and more. Stop by and tell Bo that Dave Hooker and Off the Hook Sports said, hello, Bo. David with a comment as we go to the message board early and often. Staley could be a Josh Palmer similar to Jawan and Marquez Callaway was. Okay, correct me if I'm wrong, or if you think I'm wrong. I would have, out of that group, Jennings 1, Callaway 2, Palmer 3. Where would you put Staley potentially in that trio? I don't think he's as good as Jennings.
No, he's not. He's not as good as
fair comparison.
No, he's not as good as Jennings. And I mean, none of these comparisons work because to me, it's hard because Josh Palmer, Jawan Jennings, Marquez Callaway, David, what's interesting about that trio in 2019, that was 3 wideouts. And Josh Palmer just played in the slot because he was so good and they had to put him somewhere. But, you know, but Palmer was more of a natural wideout. He moved over to wideout the next year, him and Brandon Johnson. That was a bad 2020 team. Again, not their fault. But so
it was all
I'm sorry.
Fauci did it.
Yes, Fauci did it. Fauci had a secret agenda to derail Tennessee and Jeremy Pruitt. Jeremy Pruitt should sue Dr. Fauci.
Yeah, all right, here we go.
Tennessee center Cooper Mays here. Third down.
Okay, so third down is this. You've got Boo Carter as a starter. So do you have him the starter from week 1, or does it take him a little bit to work his way into the system? Where do you stand on that?
Man, I don't back down. Week 1, baby. Boo Carter is stepping it. Actually, no, I don't have him. Yeah, no, week 1. They're playing Syracuse. They got to get that win. They got to get that dub. Boo Carter, week 1. By the way, Dave, I'll tell you this, actually. It's more likely Boo Carter starts, if Boo Carter does make an impact in the slot, like, it's more likely he starts in week 1 and then falls off during SEC play than the other way around. Because wouldn't Josh Heupel, if he was going to use Boo Carter, want to make them have to prepare for him?
Well, but you do have Georgia in the first month of the season, which is
different. But that's why you might start Boo Carter against Syracuse. Make Georgia have to prepare for that wrinkle.
Third down brought to you by Rick Terry Jewelry Design. They want to be your jeweler looking for affordable game day jewelry. A Tennessee tradition, rickterryjewelry.com. This is where everybody on the message board is going to get really mad at me. Because I'm going to go ahead and share the God's honest truth with you. This is not about Boo Carter being special. This is about Tennessee not being as talent-filled on their roster as they should be.
All SEC center Cooper Mays here. Fourth down.
How troubling is that, Caleb, that you have Josh Heupel going into his 5th season and you're talking about the massive amounts of replacements they're going to have at receiver and the skill positions? Is that troublesome? Because I think the Boo Carter thing is more about they want to placate him. They perhaps even need him because they don't completely trust Staley. Maybe Staley's changing that in spring camp. But I think it's more about that than they think he's a special, super crazy talent. You?
I think it's placating him too, but I don't think it's troubling about the lack of depth at receiver or wideout. I think it would be more troubling about the lack of depth in the secondary on the other side, or that Boo Carter is just such a rare talent. I think Braylon Staley is more than ready to step in the slot. I think the problem they have is Braylon Staley's so good, but Boo Carter can play it, but they got to placate Boo Carter. And so they're kind of thinking, who do we placate more, Boo Carter or Braylon? But then they're like, if we placate him, maybe Braylon Staley would transfer at the end of the year, because Braylon Staley is like, I'm the best slot receiver and I'm not getting playing time because of this other kid's demands.
Yep.
So there are chemistry problems that they probably have to manage. But at the same time, I'm sorry, and I keep going back to this. I don't think there's a better player on the team with the ball in his hands than Boo Carter. I'm talking like Cordarrelle Patterson style from 2012 at Tennessee.
It's pretty good. Nathaniel says, don't think that's crazy. The turnover has been huge. Getting to my point about Tennessee's roster isn't where I thought it would be heading in to week 5. General Ursa says, Boo's got endless amount of talent. I'm not worried about him. I'm more worried about Matthews and these other receivers stepping up. I want to get an update on the poll question, Caleb, which might be a little bit of a recall. But first, I want you to think about this. Who do you have more confidence in this upcoming season? Is it Boo Carter or Mike Matthews? Because if the answer is what I think it is, then there's trouble in Rocky Top. There's trouble. 4 Downs brought to you by Double D Piping.
Double D Piping provides full-service fire protection on any scale. From residential homes to government facilities, we can assist any customer through design, fabrication, installation, inspection, and demonstration of fire suppression systems. With 30 years of service across 5 states and a full staff with over 40 years experience, our quality can't be beat. Don't get caught watching what you could have prevented. Call Double D Piping, the absolute best in.
All right, let me get your take on that, Caleb. Who do you have more faith in? I have a ton of faith in Mike Matthews. I think he's going to be the breakout player on Tennessee's football team from the people I've talked to. And I have very little faith in the dedication to play Boo. So mine's a slam dunk. Mine's easy. Doesn't mean it's right, but in my mind, it's right and it's easy.
And we're talking just on offense, right? Like,
yes,
we're not asking. Okay.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, I even I have more faith in Mike Matthews, but that's because
Really?
I think Mike Matthews is a generational talent at receiver. I told you guys that I think he's like, the plan was always for this Nico Mike Matthews duo to be all world shattering this year. And last year, I think the problem with Nico was, we talked about the tackles, but they were really underrating the fact that Tennessee's go-to wideout, Josh Heupel, stayed loyal to Brew McCoy. And no matter what you think about him personally, he just didn't have, his injury held him back last year, and he couldn't stretch the field the way they needed him to. And so Mike Matthews, by the way, I even thought last year that Mike Matthews would eventually be better than Brew McCoy. So now that he's in there, I feel, look, I might have been just a little bit ahead of the curve, guys. I'm just saying, maybe I was just too far ahead when I said the Nico lab situation, created in a lab to run the offense. Maybe that shows up this year with Mike Matthews able to stretch the field. Okay, I'm basically the XFL when they did the Skycam in 2001 and then they folded, but then the NFL does the Skycam like 6 years later and decides they like that. Like I screwed up last year because I was too far ahead of my time.
That's great. So what's the poll question before we get to this day in Tennessee sports history?
What's more likely? Rick Barnes retires after this year. Rick Barnes stays 5 years.
Okay.
Would you like the answer?
I would. Let me remind people first that portions of the program are brought to you by Newbert Collision Center. For nearly 50 years, Newbert Collision Center has been East Tennessee's best choice for quality repair work and fantastic customer service. JoeNewbertCollision.com. JoeNewbertCollision.com. What do you got?
You want this day in Tennessee history?
No. I want the answer to the poll question. We don't
Sorry. The results. 58% are on my side. Rick Barnes stays 5 years. 42% are on your side. Rick Barnes retires after this year.
Okay. Let's change that up a little bit if we can. Who do you have more faith in, Mike Matthews or Boo Carter? I'm really interested to see where that goes because I think the Boo stuff is getting a little out of control. It is time for this day in Tennessee sports history, brought to you by Hound Dogs of Knoxville. Recently renovated, easy to get around, the best choice of Tennessee apparel you can imagine. Champions look good in orange. HDKnoxville.com. hdknoxville.com. This day in Tennessee sports history.
This day in Tennessee sports history.
It's cool, baby. It's cool.
Now you know, and knowing is half the battle. The Dave Hooker Show with Caleb Calhoun. Off the Hook Sports.
All right, Caleb, this day in Tennessee sports history. What do you got?
On this day in Tennessee sports history, 10 years ago today, we talked about him yesterday. Tennessee fired Donnie Tyndall after 1 year of him on the job. And Dave Hart, to his credit, stood in front of a press conference, and you felt like you knew he didn't want to be there, but he answered every single question that was asked of him that day. And he basically said, I'll stand here as long as you need. He took full responsibility for what happened. But yeah, it was kind of a really crazy time for that. It's what led to the hiring of Rick Barnes. And for the record, we talked about it yesterday. Donnie Tyndall did not get the McNeese State job. Somebody else got it. But yes, Tennessee fired Donnie Tyndall 10 years ago. And I still wonder to this day what happens with the program if Donnie Tyndall doesn't have that academic fraud scandal. Because, I mean, again, as a tactician, I don't think there were many better coaches that have ever been hired in any sport at Tennessee than Donnie Tyndall.
Nah, I think he's pretty solid too. And I know people don't want to hear that. Now, they got Rick Barnes. So maybe you give up a little bit from a schematic standpoint, but from a stability standpoint
and a development standpoint.
I mean, you're taking Rick Barnes easy all day long, right?
Yeah. Rick Barnes coaches up his players for the pros very well. And develops them and completes their games. I don't know how much Donnie does that per se. Again, as a tactician, you're not going to do it as much, particularly with Donnie Tyndall. Again, his defense is a matchup zone. His primary defense was pressing on every made basket and a matchup zone. Dave, if you're developing guys for the NBA, you know two things the NBA doesn't do: press and play matchup zone, because they would get torched by the offenses if they ever tried that.
Unsung says, why is Dave trying so hard to create a divisive scenario that if Boo does well, our other guys will be bad?
Yeah, Dave, why are you doing that?
Because that's what I think.
Dave hates Tennessee guys. No, I'm kidding.
I mean, if Boo Carter is a superstar, then it means Braylon Staley couldn't hold him off, and he's been playing receiver since he arrived at Tennessee. Boo Carter's been playing everything and they need him on defense. Listen, if Boo Carter's your leading receiver, Caleb, and you and I disagree whether or not he will be, but there's a problem. If Boo Carter is able to find his way into the lineup, it means one of two things happen. One, he managed the scenario to his liking, or two, Tennessee doesn't have enough talent at the receiver position. Guys, I don't think that's a stretch at all. Nathaniel says, I think it's more bad for the state of the program if our best receiver is a defensive player. Thank you very much. And people want to make a comparison with Travis Hunter at Colorado. Guys, that really was a generational talent. He's being talked about by NFL scouts as a potential NFL Hall of Famer already.
You know, I don't think it'll be Travis Hunter because I don't think Josh Heupel would want to use him that much. You're right. And also, again, I think Deion Sanders, there was a push to make Travis Hunter do that more than actually win games. I told you guys it very much reminded me of the McGuire home run chase in 98 when the Cardinals weren't in contention for anything, but they kept pushing Mark McGuire out there, marketing McGuire with Big Mac Land and all that for the home run chase, even though they finished like 73 and 89. No one ever pays attention to that during the summer of the state baseball.
Yeah, they pumped him up a little bit. There's no question that his rushing touchdown was just a way to check off that one last box. So they had kick return, punt return, reception, carry. What am I missing?
Oh, yeah, they wanted to give him like all types of touchdowns. I see what you're saying. Yeah. Yeah.
And that was totally manufactured. That speaks exactly to your point. That was totally manufactured and orchestrated.
Yeah. It's actually very similar to 2007, the Patriots team that went undefeated, that had a Michigan undefeated. They clinched the number 1 seed in the AFC, but they play the last week, and Bill Belichick calls 2 fades on the goal line because he wants Tom Brady to break Peyton Manning's record. Like, I mean, that was very clear.
T. Martin at South Carolina throwing every screen and flat pass known to man to get to 22 consecutive completions. I mean, for the love of goodness.
Yes, but his first 10 completions, go back and look at those. Those were tough.
His first 10 were fine, but when they realized he was pushing the record, it was all pomp and circumstance.
Well, he was pushing the record and the game was in hand, so they could do it.
Right. If I'm South Carolina, I'm still upset about that.
Well, the fans, the South Carolina fans were clapping when he did it. Like they were 1-10. What else are they going to do, Dave? Like at least they got to witness some history.
What a bunch of losers.